I want to welcome all the participants to the Waypoint55 webinar, and we are glad that you're here. Waypoint exists to help leaders and churches to get on mission and stay on mission, and our webinars each month are for some group of leaders within the church, and so this month it's for those who are missions leaders in the local church. And so two of our webinars each year are specifically for that group of people. So we're glad that you're joining us here this evening. My name is Tim Cole, and I'm the Executive Director of Waypoint. And we are glad that you're on this webinar. If this is your first time on our webinar platform, I want to explain a couple of things to you. First of all, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a couple of options, buttons down there. And the most important one probably is the Q&A button. That you can ask questions. And the way it would work on a webinar would be as soon as you think of a question, if you would type it in, even though we may not get to it till the end of the webinar, then it will go in a queue that we can see. And then as time allows at the end of the session, we will try and answer as many of the questions in the queue as possible. And so as soon as you think of it, go ahead and type that in. You can't see it, but another function that we have is a polling question where we're going to have a poll about halfway through the webinar. I've got one right now just to get prime the pump a little bit. And let's see if I can hit that one right. I don't have my glasses on, so I got to lean back. There we go. And so for those of you who are on the call already, we'd like to know how many our view are on each computer, because our attendance is often a lot larger than the number of screens that we have. And so we are glad that you can chime in on that, and we can figure out how many people we've got joining us this evening. I also want to tell you that we have a webinar channel on YouTube. If you were to search for Waypoint55 on YouTube, there's a channel that you can subscribe to. And you can view all of the previous webinars that we've done for the last 2 years, including the 4 that we've done on missions, and particularly on this topic about missionary care. It's about the primary topic for all of the missions the missions webinars that we've had. And so you can look and get more information from webinars that we've done at that time. So it looks like we've had about everybody chime in. So it's a lot of solo people here tonight compared to typical. I'm going to leave that up just a little bit longer. I also want to tell you that I want to give thanks to our ministry partner, Mid-Atlantic Christian University, who has paid for our webinar platform for the entire year. And so they allow us to do this, and they're a regional partner of ours. And so we're thankful that they provide this service for us to be able to serve the churches together. And so I always want to thank them both at the beginning and the end. I also want to tell you about one other exciting thing about missions in particular, because of the people that are on this webinar tonight. And that is about an exciting campaign that we have coming up in 3 years. Actually, the campaign has started now, but Waypoint is going to be hosting the International Conference on Missions in 2021. So in just a little bit under 3 years. And it'll be in Richmond, Virginia in November of 2021. And as a function of that, we have created this campaign where we're going to invite churches to give to a special fund so that we would see 21 churches planted around the globe as a result of us hosting the conference in 2021. So I've got a map here that I've just put up with that campaign. And rather than add 21 churches to the globe, we're going to try and multiply with 5 organizations that'll plant multiple projects within their ministry. And so if you are on this webinar tonight, we'd love for you to consider contributing to that as a church. And we've already had our goal for those 21 churches is to raise $500,000, and we're a little bit over $300,000 already with nearly 3 years to go. And so when that ICOM campaign comes, or when ICOM comes to Richmond in 2021, if you didn't sign up, you'll be sad that you didn't at that stage to become part of this big group of churches that are contributing between now and then to see churches planted all over the globe. And so if you need some more information about that, you can go to 21in21campaign.com. There's a place to indicate your church's interest in contributing, but there's also an FAQs page. There's a video that it was about 5 5 minutes that explains the details of the campaign. And so we invite you to go to 21and21campaign.com to find out more about that. There will also be an automated email that goes to all of our participants tonight. The email will go out tomorrow evening, and in that email will be links to our presenters' emails and their website and a couple other resources, and there'll be a link to that campaign as well, so you can click on it and go visit that. And so please be on the lookout for that email that you'll receive tomorrow. So without further ado, though, I would like to give the gavel to David and Lorene Wilson, and they are joining us from Kansas City. ICOM this year will be in Kansas City, so it'll be local for them. But tonight they're joining us from the Kansas City area, if I'm correct. And they have been part of Avant Ministries, which is a long-standing missions organization, from what I understand, over 100 years old, serving around the globe, and presenting specifically on this topic of minding the gaps and really getting the church involved in missionary care. And you've seen the title, going from caring about your missionaries to caring for your missionaries. And I'm part of a church right now that's trying to solve that puzzle on how we can make that transition. And hopefully yours is as well. And so we're excited for them to present to us tonight. And I've got their names here, David and Lorene Wilson. And there it is, Kansas City. So, so I'm going to go ahead and give the floor to them, and they can kind of introduce themselves and get right on rolling into the slides and the presentation for this evening. Dave and Lorene, it's all yours.
Hey, Tim, thanks for introducing us. And yeah, we come to you live from Kansas City, home of barbecue. We love to go to church and go to barbecue right afterwards. And it's a good place to do that. And I invite anyone in the audience, if you ever in the Kansas City area, come and visit us at Avant Ministries. Avant's been around, since 1892. And it's kind of funny, this year we're aging 2 years because we're actually merging. Avant Ministries is merging with Camino Global. Camino Global used to be Central American Mission, or CAM. And both of our organizations were founded by the same guy. Back in those days, it was Schofield. C.I. Schofield was our founder for both organizations. And we joke around a little bit that we've been dating for 127 years. Now we're going to tie the knot. So this year we're merging, and it's going to be Avant Ministries. So yeah, anybody in the audience would like to come and visit, we'll show you around and take you out to barbecue. So it's just an open invitation for you. We've been there for a little over.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we've been there for a little more than 2 years now. Serve as Director of Church Relations, and not too many people know what that. Church Relations has a lot of components to it. Has a little bit of mobilization aspects. We mobilize church-based teams. So if your church is interested in going to some far-off place to send a team of people to live, to learn the language, learn the culture, and plant the church where there is no church, we are wanting to make sure that that happens through our church-based team model. We call it joint venture. Another part of church relations is doing missionary care, helping churches that support Avant missionaries do more than just send a check, but actually do something that's proactive and intentional in caring for the workers that they've sent out. So those are basically our two areas that we work with, supporting churches and doing church relations. I see that maybe some people are having some difficulties hearing me. Are you coming through all right?
Yeah, it looks like we are. Also making sure they can see you, but I want to make sure that you are on the screen and not the slides. Let me hit stop share and see if they can see you now in the view. All right, I'm glad somebody piped in. The volume is just marginal. All right. Hopefully they can see you now, though. All right, there you go. But go ahead and lean forward and speak into your microphone. But I'm not sure why they're not seeing you. But we will go to slides. They can see your slides. Okay. So why don't we go ahead and jump into that. Let me go over there. Right there. There we go.
Okay.
All right. That's good. There we go.
All right.
All right. I've got to get that thing out of the way. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Go right ahead now.
All right. So a little bit about us. Lauren and I have been married for 27 years now. We've served primarily this 2.5 years at an agency, but before that we served in local churches as mission pastors. So our perspective comes from widely from the church, but now that we've got to see the other side of the equation, we've been able to get to know what it's like from the agency side, and hopefully we can bring a balanced view tonight as we share some of the things that we've heard. I think they need to hear your voice a little bit.
Oh, they will in a minute. Almost.
Okay, so I'll keep going. So some of the unique needs of missionaries. I just wanted to share a couple stories about what's happened recently, some of the missionaries that we've sent out through Avant, and some of my experience serving in the church, because missionaries have unique needs that not everyone has. Most of you in the audience have some aspect of missionary care, or else you wouldn't be on this. But let me just share two unique things that's happened recently. One, a transition. Was talking to a young couple. They were on the field for about 4 years, and they transitioned back. They were right at the time of at the end of their first term, and they're transitioning back home. They're not going to go back for a second term. So this reentry phase that they're in, it really weighed heavy on them. And so they were coming back. They had some concerns about how the church was going to receive them. But one of the things somebody on the field did or said was just a great way of getting them to transition back home. They said, look, whatever you do, leave a lot of the stuff on the field. You don't have to take stuff home. But one of the most important things for you to do is to take a picture of your children's rooms, the bedrooms where they live. Take a picture of it and make sure that you take all of that stuff back home with you. And then what you do back home, wherever you land, apartment, house, wherever it is, set up their bedroom exactly as it was on the field. And that would help in the transition from the field back to home for the kids. And he said it worked perfectly. The kids were like, woke up the next day, everything looked familiar, and they were able to transition back home wonderfully. So that's something that we don't normally think about, but someone on the field did. And now you, as an audience, you have a little bit more sensitivity to people as a result of that. Another thing was persecution. We just had a missionary recently. He was in a foreign land. I'm not going to say where he was, but some folks heard about what he was talking about and decided that he was not welcome there. And as he was leaving, they threw a rock and hit him in the head. So that's real persecution. We talk about persecution a lot, and we don't always understand it. But when someone hears your message, rejects your message, and then does something physical in a tangible way to keep you from coming back, real persecution. Luckily, God bless this guy, and he's going back. He's not going to let that deter him. So missionaries are hardy souls. They've got a lot of oomph in their walk, and they know how to take a hit and then go right back into it. So that's just two unique needs of missionaries that you need to be aware of. And the third one is being forgotten.
Forgotten. And I'm sure you guys have heard missionaries say this. At least we've heard people say this quite often, that they just feel forgotten. Nobody knows them. They don't get much communication. And commonly as a church, we would, have all this time and energy spent in getting them prepared to go, all the training, praying, commissioning, everything. And then we send them off with our prayers and blessings. But then, life just gets busy. I'll be honest about that. That happens. And unless we have an intentional plan of caring for them, then we will tend to forget and not follow up. So our plan is to be intentional and proactive. You're going to hear us say that quite a lot, probably during this presentation, but that's two things that we really focus on, so that no missionary is forgotten and we're not waiting for something to happen before we respond to their needs.
Yeah, one of the things that happens in a mission agency, they have the process is called member care within an agency. And they have a lot of people that are doing work to help care for missionaries, but it's sometimes reactive. It has a reactive nature. When something happens, when something goes wrong, then they jump into action. But what we're trying to do is help the church understand they can be proactive. They can be very intentional and do things not just as it happens or when the need arises, but do things ahead of time, anticipating people coming home and being able to give them advice and guidance coming home, anticipate them moving into a new field of ministry or whatever it is. So being intentional and proactive is the thing that we want churches to be involved in, because the ratio of church-based missionary care can be flipped from what happens on the agency side. Another thing with church-based missionary care is to be non-evaluative. It's easier to write it than it is to say it, but being non-evaluative. Here's what I mean by that. A missions committee is one thing. They have to make decisions based on budget, based on calendar, based on all these things. They have to make decisions that are evaluating. If a missionary's performance isn't up, sometimes churches say, you know, we're going to have to make a decision whether or not we're going to continue to support you. There's lots of those kind of decisions that have to be made at a different level than what we're proposing with church-based missionary care. Missionary care in the church needs to be a safe place where they can share their needs. That's not going to be part of the evaluation process when the budget time comes around. They need to be able to confide with people saying, you know, I'm struggling with this specific thing, so that they don't have fear of saying, wow, if somebody finds out that this is happening in our marriage, if this is happening with our children, if this is happening with my morality life, then they may be evaluated out of the missionary sending process of the church. So we ask that churches create separate church-based missionary care team, separate from the missions committee that has to make those evaluative decisions. Another thing, this is a relational thing. Missionary care is very relational, and it's a partnership between the church, the agency, and the missionary.
So we really see this as a value in that sending triangle. When we're preparing people to go out and we're caring for them, we really see the partnership and the value of the church, the agency, and the missionary working together in this to fulfill the Great Commission, because it takes all of us. And we've had experience, as Dave mentioned, in the church, and now we're on the agency side, and we recognize this even more now as a priority. So we desire to see this true partnership between the three and see that each has a specific role. And actually on our website, which we'll mention in a minute, on the front page of that website, we've got a list of roles and responsibilities, potential roles and responsibilities that each one can play. So that's helpful to see the value of each one and what each one brings to the table. So it's not just the missionary out there, but it's going to take all of us to do it. So I would encourage you to go to the threestrandpartners.org website, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, we'll have it at the end of the slide deck, and also these slides will be available after the webinar is over with, so that you'll be able to at least download the slides and get more information, especially our contact information. And we're always willing to talk to you offline to help you in any way form your missionary care team at your church.
Yeah, I've got the slides preloaded already. The PDF of it is in the automated email that'll go out tomorrow. So everybody will have a chance to go to that link and download it.
Great, thank you. So the last part is being mutually deferential. We have really tried to figure out a cleaner word for that. Just haven't been able to figure it out, but mutually deferential between these three partners is what we'd like to highlight in all these relationships, because the missionaries' health, spiritual health, emotional health, all that is dependent upon these three, the church, the agency, and the missionary working interconnectedly. So mutually deferential just basically means being submissive to each other, being courteous and respectful to each other, and having a non-superior attitude. And here's some of the things that we see. You know, one organization, one or the other is going to take the lead, but not all the time. Sometimes the people on the field need to make a decision. Sometimes the people at the headquarters of the mission agency needs to make a decision. Sometimes the church needs to make a decision. So if all of them are working in tangent with each other, then they're not going to be superior to each other. They're not going to be courteous and respectful, and they're going to be submissive to the will of the Holy Spirit, working within all of those different partnerships. So that's the what of Mind the Gaps. The why of Mind the Gaps is also very important. And it comes from Scripture, of course. We really want to make sure that Mind the Gaps, caring for the missionary in the church, that we stop outsourcing member care, missionary care, to the agency. The church's role is to send and to spread the Great Commission around the world.
So I just want to read that verses from Acts 13 that are a part of the slide. There we go. Now there were in the church at Antioch prophets and teachers. While they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them." Then after fasting and praying, they laid their hands on them and sent them off.
Yeah, and it's important to know it's not just the missionary saying, "I think God's calling me," but it was the church responding and saying, "We sense the Lord calling Barnabas and Saul." So it was a calling to the missionary, but it was also a calling to the church. The church needs to be intimately involved in the process and not just outsourcing aspects to just to the agency. Now, I love to think through these last four things that the church did. They fasted. It was a tangible demonstration of what the Lord was doing, and a tangible demonstration of their seriousness and commitment to the Lord and eagerness to hear what the Lord was saying. They prayed, a spiritual thing. They were intimately involved in praying and making their request. Laid their hands on them, which was that commissioning, that time that they sent the people out. And in sending them out, I can just imagine Paul and Barnabas and Saul getting a care basket. They got some money in their pockets. They've got tickets for the boat that was going off, and all those kind of things, all those things that they needed to make their mission happen, happened as a result of their church sending them off well, and not just to get rid of them, but to actually send them off well.
And basically, when it comes to the agency, they're really it's a busy place, taking care of the needs of so many missionaries, which includes the training and preparing and praying. And at Avant, we have wonderful missionary care folks that take care of our people. And I just want to give you a couple of stats and to give you something to think about. So we have about 15 member care staff for roughly 500 missionaries. So when you do the math, that's about a 33-to-1 ratio. So 33 missionaries to one member care person. So how about we flip that around to the church, and where we could say there's 750 church members that support 10 families. That's one missionary to 75 church members. So that's a huge difference, and there's so much potential there. So just something to think about.
Yeah, missionaries are sent to hard places, and they need a church body to help them be resilient. So another part of the why of missionary care in the church is to produce resilience for those hard places that they're going to. I mean, most of the easy place is already taken. The gospel has already taken root. We're talking about those places in the world that used to be recipients of missionaries are now sending missionaries. If we look through, what countries in the world are sending the most missionaries out, it's countries like Brazil and South Korea and Nigeria and India and China. Those places are sending people already. So the places that are in need of the gospel are hard places, and they need resilient people going there, and churches that are willing to give all their attention to those hard places. So a missionary's life is going to be hit hard personally. It's going to be hit hard in their relationships. A lot of people are come home before the end of their first term is usually as a result of team conflict. They go out in teams, they're not able to really relate to each other, build those strong ties, and then they come home. I've heard the statistic, 71% of people who come home on their first term, before their first term ends, and come home off the field, 71% come home for preventable reasons. It could be, non-preventable reasons would be health, finishing the job, and all those kind of things. But for preventable reasons, a lot of those preventable reasons are the relationships that are broken within their context. And then also spiritual. We want to produce people who are spiritually resilient, who are going to be able to stay connected to the Lord. I hear so many missionaries when they come off the field and they go to a worship service for the first time, they're just very aware of the Spirit of the Lord because they have not worshiped in their own language, in their heart language, in years and years that goes by. And so ways of keeping them spiritually resilient while they're on the field is utmost important. I think that would some of the things that the church can do specifically. Some of the ideas that I've had in the past were having communion together, maybe getting online on a Skype call with your missionaries that are in those hard places, and actually having a Skype call with them, doing communion together, having Skype on during the worship service and letting them just share, maybe asking the missionary to do a 2 or 3 minute video, a quick update. Something like that can help them stay connected, but also sending the pastors messages. Sometimes the pastor back in the church, if you are able to send a link so that the missionaries that are on the field can actually hear the pastor's message, hear the worship and all that. Those are some things that are really practical, but it takes somebody actually doing that and helping them do it. So it's got to be intentional. It's got to be built into your process.
So the next one, I can read that.
Yeah, if you can read that for me.
Okay, this is a quote from Faith Delacour, who's in member care at SIM. We view the church as a strategic partner in sending out missionaries from our organization to wherever God has led them to serve in the world. While some churches have well-developed missionary care structures, there are many which are unaware of how to care for their people. So we work together with not just churches and missionaries, but also other agencies. We partner together, and SIM is one of those. And Stan and Faith are our dear friends, and they're doing an incredible job in member care at that organization. Actually, they've read Mind the Gap's the book, and also are giving that to every missionary that is going through them to the field. And they've seen the impact that it's caused. So they're a huge, they recommended the book. And they also wrote a chapter in our new book, just released last year, on engaging the church in missionary mobilization. So that's just a shameless plug.
Yeah, 2 shameless plugs here.
2 shameless plugs.
One is that we did just publish another book on missionary mobilization in the church, how to engage the church in mobilizing missionaries. It's called Pipeline, and it's also available on our website. But one of the important things that we wanted to share with you guys is if you, your church, your mission agency, whatever kind of organization you're with, if you'd like to purchase quantities of books. We sell them on our website at cost, so that whatever it is that we pay for the book to be printed and shipped to us, that's what you pay. And that way you can give these out to the churches that you're related to. You can read them as a group. We don't want you to go in debt to get this, but we want this material in the hands of people that will actually take it, use it. And Mind the Gaps has been really effective for a lot of churches, just to think through what's going on in the world with their missionaries and how to better care for them in strategic ways. So we've got a poll that we want to do right quick. Can we run that through?
Yeah, let me hit that one and then go to this one. There we go.
I'll read it.
Yeah, so does your church have a missionary care team that is separate from the missions committee and or staff? So just think about your church. Is it just a missions committee, or do you have a missionary care team that is separate? Because we're going to go into a confidentiality phase here. Just want to see how many actually have this. Tim, can we go on while you're...
Yeah, I can share the results with everybody there for a second, so we can see one person online tonight has it, and everyone else is not.
Okay. So I believe Dave had mentioned already a little bit about this team that we're talking about, how to build a missionary church-based team for doing Mind the Gaps. So this would be a separate team from the missions committee or the staff or the elders of the church. It would be a team that where they would feel safe to share what's really going on the field and just in their lives, and where they can share their difficulties and struggles. So first you could brainstorm about who to ask to be on the team, and I would say to ask them personally after you've prayed and thought of people that might fit well. And think of people that are not currently involved in missions. And I'll give some examples of some people that were on our teams that before we asked them, they had no involvement at all in missions. So one was a marriage and family therapist and a counselor. They were not engaged in missions at all. And once they became part of this team, that was like a natural fit for them to be on this team because they did such a good job at that. It just came naturally. And then some of the other ones that were on the team were former missionaries. And of course, they would know and be very familiar with the rigors of missionary life, and they could understand and care deeply. And then some parents of missionaries, perhaps. And also future missionaries. Remember to involve young people in your church to be a part of these teams. And then the believers with the spiritual gifts of encouragement, mercy, wisdom and discernment, and administration, just to name a few ideas of people that could possibly be on the missionary care team.
Administration doesn't sound like a, it's not a warm, fuzzy type person, but, you need people that kind of keep you on track. You need somebody that can call a meeting together, that take notes and then remind you at the end of the meeting, here's what we agreed to do, and then follow up during the rest of the month and say, these are things that we were supposed to be doing, and you double check. So people with this gift of administration, sometimes they're a bear to deal with. I know to put them on your team.
Really?
Because my wife has a wonderful gift of administration, and she bugs me. She pokes me. She says, this is what you need to be doing. And it wouldn't get done if she wasn't doing that. So take advantage of people in your church and the gifts and skills that they have. Use them for the kingdom's advantage. Use them to make sure that God's work is being done. And it'll be a blessing, not a curse, but a blessing to have people like that reminding you and doing wonderful things. So as we're doing this, you build this team. So what we encourage you to do is now, my teams always had, the umbrella group was a mission development council. You might call it a missions committee, whatever it is, but that was kind of the umbrella group. And then under that umbrella group, I would have a missionary care team. I would have a missionary mobilization team. I would have a short-term mission team. All those people were doing those specific roles. But on those teams would be a couple of people who would report back to the missions committee or the mission development council, whatever it is that you call it. Now, that's kind of how I structured thing in the church. You might want to do something a little bit different, but having people that are on that missionary care team is important for you to keep them engaged and active. Once I would build the team first, invite these people onto the team, and then ask them to start forming what we call a poem. And so how to mind the gaps is our next question. The poem, The Philosophy of Effective Ministry. That should be the next slide. And basically, this sentence right here took us 6 months to develop. We had to flesh it out. We fought over it. We talked about it. We dreamed about it, what it is. And it's amazing that a 6-month process produced this one sentence. And then this sentence started all these other things that we started doing. But we had to get our priorities first. So if you just read through this, to promote the well-being, the growth, the effectiveness, and the sustainability of your church's career missionaries through meeting their physical, spiritual, and emotional needs. That's an easy sentence to read, but for 6 months we hashed it out. We wanted to make sure that effectiveness was in there. That was a weird one. Why? We want to care for their well-being. What about effectiveness? Well, a missionary that's not being effective is not feeling very secure in their role, in their job. So they need to be effective. They need to be able to see fruit or have somebody else point out what their fruit is. Sustainability, keeping them on the field. That's an important priority for you to have. They are going to struggle. They're going to have issues on the field, but they need to be able to stay resilient and be sustainable on the field. Physical, spiritual, and emotional. I know some people get a little queasy around emotional things in the church. Physical needs of missionaries, that's an obvious one, but that's something that your church needs to kind of flesh out. What is your philosophy of effective ministry? Another part of it is the core values. We worked out, that kind of flowed from our poem, but the core values were these. We want to care through grace-oriented relationships, not demanding, not overbearing, but we wanted to be grace-filled and be able to have a safe environment for our missionaries to share what's on their mind, what's on their burden, what's being a burden for them, and we would not judge them. The second thing is to be aware of the gaps that were not being met by their agency, hence the name of the book, Mind the Gaps. We wanted to take care of the gaps. In our church, we had 27 missionaries. They were from 14 or 15 different mission agencies. And so each agency had a different perspective, had a different thing that they did for their workers. So we had the contact information for the member care people. We had contact information for all the different field leaders. And for each of our missionaries, we had what we called a hot sheet. One sheet of paper that had all that information. The kids, the birth dates, all those kind of things were all taken care of on that one sheet of paper. And that way we could identify, are there gaps? Are there things that's not being taken care of by the agency, by others? And helping them just through knowledge and information from them. Also, the next plan was to promote congregational awareness and involvement. We didn't want to just be the missionary care team, but we wanted the entire congregation to care for our workers. Not just, the entire congregation didn't know all the stuff that was going on with our missionaries, but they knew what they could be praying for. They knew how to be involved, short-term trips, whatever kind of things that were going on. Total congregational awareness and involvement was our goal. And then the last is to encourage openness through confidentiality. We wanted our workers to be able to say, I'm struggling with this. Would you pray for me? I'm struggling this. Would you recommend a conference that I can go to, or a webinar that we could listen to, something that would allow them to feel free and not judged and not held to a higher level of accountability, such what the elders of the church or the staff of the church would have. Okay, and so now that we're talking about confidentiality policy, I just want to run through this a little bit because it is on our website, it is in the book, but the confidentiality policy is something that's very important, and it's something that we need to be aware of, just a few of the issues in it. So as I just read it, all communication with members of the missionary care team at our church is confidential. We want you to be able to talk with us openly about your needs so that we may be of help. The only times we'll break this agreement of confidentiality are as follows. And these are, let me just help you understand, these are the three things that we had exceptions. If it was a dangerous situation, abuse and all those kind of things, first step, we want you to self-report. We don't want to be the tattletales. We want you to go and self-report. If you don't self-report, then we will follow up with you. If you don't do it in that time period, then we will have to report it. But we want to empower them to be self-reporting. The second, if we discover that something interferes with your work, we will encourage you to inform a trusted friend to get help. We will follow up with you, but it won't be something that that we would necessarily report on you, but it would be something that we will really try to keep you accountable for that. And then the third level is when we feel the need to consult with others about your situation, we will ask your permission. And they may not give us permission for some things if it's a dangerous situation. Yep, we probably need to inform on them because we are mandated reporters in a missionary care situation. So, but we will ask their permission. All right, the next few things, just layers of church involvement, developing relationships. You want to develop different relationships for different people in the church. Missionary care team needs to know everything. Congregation needs to know fewer things. The sending agency needs to know some things, in small groups too. And Lorraine was going to share a little bit about what small groups do.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I mean, enlisting small groups to be involved in your missionaries is one of the best ways to do this and involve the whole church. In our church, we had our small groups adopt a missionary. So they would adopt one, maybe two missionaries. And someone on our care team provided some guidelines, some things for them to do, some expectations like prayer, monthly contact, learning about their ministry and field where they lived more, and also take care of their practical needs while they were on home assignment, which was a huge help to add to the help of the missionary care team. Mm-hmm. They knew these missionaries intimately and were very involved, and then it involved them in their lives and also in missions in general, got them more involved and interested. There was a call made from the missionary care team, just a simple call every year to make sure that that group was still committed. So it was an ongoing thing, which worked out really great in our church. We're grateful for that. So,
yeah. So the missionary care team would be one layer, staff and elders another layer, congregation another layer, sending agency. You've got those relationships and those connections, and then small groups. The reason sometimes people ask me the question, well, isn't that the mission pastor's job to do all of these things? Yes, it's the mission pastor's job to make sure that these things get done. But it's not the mission pastor's job to do all of this. Remember, Scripture says something to the effect that we're to equip the saints for the work of ministry. That's more a biblical approach. Equipping the saints, making sure that the entire sainthood in the church is actively engaged in working and doing the things that God's called them to do. Some mission pastors don't have the gift of empathy and mercy, right? So, I mean, he may be more of a strategist in his mind. And if somebody calls and says, hey, you know, I'm struggling with my kids. Oh, man, sorry about that. And then, you know, you don't get much help from a person that lacks empathy and mercy. So having somebody with empathy and mercy on your mission team to be able to send them to, that is the beauty of the body of Christ, all working together to fulfill the Great Commission together, not just alone. So just some things to keep in mind for your transitions, common ministry transitions with missionaries. We talk about intentional, we talk about being proactive. If your missionary is planning a ministry focus change, they're not doing church planting anymore, they're moving into more justice type ministry. If they're moving from Afghanistan to Tajikistan or to Somalia, then their location is going to be a big thing that your team needs to be a part of, and not just making decisions, but also helping them transition. Also, missionaries do change agencies. Every once in a while, missionary, you know, has a problem within their agency and they have to transition to another one. Some marriage transitions, singles getting married, man, that's a great thing, but you know, they need some help. They need some guidance along the way. Grief and loss of a child, of a loved one, of family members back home, even of a spouse that's on the field. Those are traumatic experiences, and I fully expect your churches are going to be working with people with grief and loss. Re-entry, coming back home after a field assignment, and then also retirement. What's your church going to do for those missionaries that are retiring and they didn't save up money for a retirement? Those are significant, important times in your missionary's life to be able to work with them. So now we're going to enter into a phase of question and answer, and I think you've got a slide there with our website and all that on it too.
I do. So if anybody has any questions that they would like to give to David or Lorene, go ahead and chime in. The questions that we had were about just about getting us all set up. Sorry for the technical difficulties that we had going in. It was really odd, David and Lorene, that every time I talked, then you came in volume low and then it came back up slowly. So I'm going to have to contact our provider about that to see if your volume is really low after I'm done talking here. But are there any questions that you would have for David and Lorene about setting up missionary care at your church and what that looks like for a church, whether you're a church of 50 or 150 or 550? How do you get started with that? So let me pull up the Q&A queue here. All right. Well, no immediate questions. Maybe we'll have some. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in and we will be able to answer them.
Did we answer all?
Here we go. We got one good question here. This is great for everybody. Can you give some specific things a local church can do on a regular basis to help their missionaries feel supported? One example I thought of, providing sermon links so they feel, and even worship links if you're streaming your service would be huge for your missionaries to feel like they're part of your church. But what else might you suggest are some proactive, simple, regular things a church can do?
Okay, so communication is key. It needs to be regular. Sometimes it feels awkward to put a missionary's name on a calendar to contact him on the 15th of every month. And, you know, it may feel, you know, disingenuous or not organic or anything, but, you know, you really need to put it on a regular schedule. I'm going to call you and talk to you on the 15th of every month, or some plan like that. So communication on a regular basis from people back home is key. Another thing, I don't know if you know this, but missionaries on the field sometimes call short-term mission trip participants pigeonaries. If you've ever heard the word pigeonaries before, they say they fly in, they make a mess all over the place, and then they leave us with a mess to clean up when they leave. So we got into a habit of sending short-term missionary care specific teams, 2 or 3 people that went and stayed with the missionaries, maybe lived in a hotel or in their house or some other place where they could babysit the kids so that the parents could go out on a date night. They were able to do like a pre and a post thing. There's a Cerny Smith assessment, cultural adjustment assessment that they can do. And it's a wonderful way of finding out where the missionary is before you get there. And then while you're there, you'd have something to discuss, something to talk about, something that's more care related rather than project related. So the big teams of 45 teenagers coming and invading their space for a week wears them out. But some people, when they come back on a missionary care visit, they actually are able to say, you know, we were refreshed as a result of this short-term trip, not burned out.
I can think of one that we didn't, we're going to mention, but just as far as having a prayer team that would have ongoing prayer and real time. I mean, we had this group that met for consistently for like 20 years on Sunday morning at 8 a.m. was prayer for our missionaries. And this guy that led it, he was on our care team, that he got regular up-to-date prayer requests from all of our missionaries. And he actually wrote a chapter in the book as well that gave some more ideas on how to pray. But just the fact that he kept up with the missionaries weekly meant, I mean, they felt supported because they knew people would be praying for them on our Sunday morning at church. So that was pretty significant. So.
All right. Well, our time is just about up, and so I want to thank you all for joining us from Kansas City here this evening. I do want to tell our participants, first of all, thanks for joining us, and we hope you join us for other webinars coming up. I'd like to share with you the next two that we have on our calendar. And so if you are not in the categories here, we'd like you to invite those in your church who are. Next month, we have one for elders. And the guys from the E2 Effective Elders group have been great with us for the last couple of years, a couple times a year, and how to get your elder board to work as a team. And so we hope that's a big one. And if you're not on your elder board, you probably need to recommend to your elders that they join that webinar. And then in May, we've got one for your safety and security team. One of our church planters has also recently been promoted to the fire chief of his county, working with the rescue squad. And so he's going to talk about from both perspectives, as a pastor of a church that's growing and the fire chief, how do you make sure that you take care of all the things that you might not think of from that perspective for safety at your church. And the other thing I would tell you is in the next week, we've got 3 Art of the Sermon sessions coming up, which is the biggest event that we have for the year on site. Tomorrow in Richmond, Wednesday in Burlington, North Carolina. That says Burlington, Virginia. And then next Wednesday in Martinsburg, West Virginia. And so if you would like your preacher to preach better, you might want to make sure he gets the information about that and send him to one of those sessions. But otherwise, we are really glad that you've joined us here this evening. We would love to see story after story of churches that make that transition from caring about their missionaries, which I think every church does, to caring for their missionaries in a real proactive, intentional way. So we're glad that you've joined us, and we'd invite you to email David and Lorene. Their emails will be in the follow-up email tomorrow with even further questions that you would have about making that transition to doing an exemplary job of taking care of your missionaries. So thanks, Wilsons, for joining us tonight, and we hope you all have a good evening.